especially as a woman, you know when something's wrong with your body.
Yeah, and I did. Like, I knew immediately because when I first started having these symptoms and things were going wrong, like, it was a night and day. Like, I was fine one day, and then after that, it was like, it was hell.
Terrible.
You know?
Yeah.
You're listening to
Big
Sis Energy.
Welcome back to Big Sis Energy. I'm your host, Mackenzie.
And I'm your other host, Malia.
And today we have a super exciting episode because we just got back from LA. We're back in Arizona and we're ready to get back into the Big Sis Energy.
Yes. It's weird because we've been gone for like 10 days and I feel like I haven't been at the studio in a long time. It feels like a month or something.
I know. And I'm like, this is our, fourth or fifth episode?
Yeah.
So I'm like, hey guys, I'm excited to be back.
Me too.
But I'm super excited for today's episode because we're actually going to be talking about mental health and we're also going to be reading letters that we wrote to our younger self. Because guys, okay, so if you guys don't know Taty Coakley, go watch her YouTube videos. She is a sweetheart.
She has a podcast and I think we were her second episode. But it was so cute.
Oh my gosh.
We had the best time just hanging out with her in general. I was like, the fact that we met her the day before we went on the podcast, it felt like we've been besties for like a long time.
I was like, are you her sister or?
No, she was literally giving sister vibes. And when you meet someone like that and it's super genuine and a natural interaction, it was like, dang, like there are good people out there and she's super fun, super genuine. And it was cool to be on her podcast just to see how she hosted it and everything. But
she did such a good job. I was like, what the heck?
Pink. Like everything was pink, the whole studio. It was adorable. But basically what she had us do, she had us write letters to our younger self. And we got super emotional. So we ended up like crying on the thing.
We were bawling our eyes out.
I did not expect to get like super deep and emotional.
And as a host, like she really did a good job of asking us the right questions and also like getting that emotional side out of us because we didn't go into that episode expecting to bawl our eyes out, of course, but we did. And I'm like, oh, it was just, honestly, it was kind of healing. It was a good experience. And anyways, her podcast is called 1-800 Self-Love Club.
Which is so cute. Like that's such a good name.
I love it. So if you guys want to go watch that episode, it's already out. Make sure to go watch it.
Hey, like, should we kind of talk about and update you guys what we were doing in LA? We went out to LA for a hair campaign with Briogeo.
Guys.
We can say it now. I know before we were like, oh, hush, hush, like we can't say anything, but now we can. And we were part of their campaign. We did like a whole photo and video shoot.
Oh my gosh.
We actually did an interview too, which we weren't ready for the interview, but on set, everything was so professional. Like it felt like we were on a movie scene.
It was very intense and I was a little nervous.
Me too.
I wasn't necessarily nervous for the modeling aspect of it, but once we got mic'd up and they had the 3, 2, 1 action.
No, I was
Mackenzie, Malia, take one. I was like, what is going on?
I know. I was like, oh, this is the real deal. Like I was not expecting that. And the fact that they had like all these different camera angles and like camera crew, like this one lady had this entire, I think it was like a 35-pound camera.
It was insane.
Hooked up to her. And she was like this little tiny girl. I was like, how are you doing this?
I know.
It was so cool to see the behind the scenes of it and like what goes into like filmmaking and commercials and all of that.
Yeah. Because there was, 30 plus people there?
Yeah, there was a whole, probably more than 30.
Yeah, it was intense. But honestly, seeing the behind the scenes of it was inspiring.
Yeah.
And everyone there was so authentic, so genuine. The makeup team, the hair team, the photographer, everyone made us feel like bosses. Like
bosses, but also like a family too. And the fact that we met everyone that day was
crazy.
Everyone made us feel super kind of at home and just like a family. And like Kenzie was saying, everyone was super genuine and authentic. And I felt like it made the partnership feel so natural.
Yes.
Like I was like, this is honestly probably the best partnership we could have ever done in our career.
Oh my gosh.
Like it would just worked so well.
And for one, I'm not going to lie to you guys. We've used Briogeo for a minute now. We put them in so many of our videos. When we transform Michaela's hair from braids to curls, we use the scalp revival. Like this was just a very organic partnership and it's products that we love. So of course we were like, when they wanted us to model for their campaign, I was like, huh?
Yeah.
Us? What?
I couldn't believe it. And also, too, like the story behind it. The CMO's daughter, first of all, the CMO, she was
amazing.
She was so sweet. She was super cool. But her daughter actually came across and she watches our TikTok videos. And she was sending her mom our videos in math class. And she was like, her mom got mad. She's like, why are you sending me TikToks in math class? Like, you should be in school. And then she was like, no, just watch them. Like, these girls are using your hair products.
They're using Briogeo.
She was like, oh, like, what the heck? So she checked it out. And that's how she came across our channel and our page. And basically how we booked that gig.
Yeah.
I was like, what the heck? Like, you just never know who's watching on social media. Like, that is so insane to me.
And the fact that it was her daughter, and you guys, we got to meet her daughter. She was at the shoot. She was the sweetest
so cute
girl ever. I think she was 14 years old.
Yeah.
And she was so sweet. And I'm like, thank you for sending our video to your mom, because this wouldn't have happened without you.
No.
Literally.
That's the cool thing about the internet is, like, you just don't know who's watching. Like, you don't know what opportunities and experiences it might bring you.
Yeah.
You know? So that's what I love about social media as well.
For
Because I was
sure.
like, that is just, it still blows my mind. Like, because I know we've told this story a few times, but now that we're saying it on the podcast, I'm like, dang, like, that really happened. Like,
it did not feel real.
it didn't.
Like, the whole time, even I think until the pictures come out and until we see like where all the pictures are, because there's like a % chance that it could be on a billboard in Times Square.
So if it is, I know we are for surely going to New York just to stand underneath the billboard. Like, we obviously have to. We obviously have to.
But I don't feel like it'll feel real until I see all the pictures and I'm like, that's me. That's my curly hair. Oh my gosh.
And the fact that the lighting and everything was so, like, it was
Perfect.
chef's kiss. Like, it was perfect. Every single person on this team was so professional, and they knew what they were doing. They had it down pat.
Yeah.
So, like, we looked good. Like, it on, like, every angle. That sounds kind of weird to say, but, like, the lighting was perfect. Like, the makeup artists did their job. The hair team.
It looked edited without any editing.
I remember the girls before us that did the shoot, they were super sweet, and we had a dinner with them. And they were showing us the behind the scenes, and I was like, there's no way this is unedited. Like, they looked airbrushed. It was insane. So I was like, wow, like, we're working with a good team.
It was perfect.
Yeah.
So that was our week last week. It was amazing. I'm so excited.
We went to Disneyland too. That was fun.
With Briogeo, I'm like, y'all took us to Disney?
know.
Come on now. I was like, what?
that was so cool. And I feel like it brought back, like, my childhood. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like a little kid again.
Really? I mean, it was amazing. I still am like giddy just thinking about it.
I know.
We are going to read our letters to our younger self. I'm so excited for this. I'm like, I hope I don't cry, because when we were on the podcast, I was freaking tearing up. But
I feel like today, I won't cry, just because.
Me too.
I feel like I want to read it well, but also when I was first writing it, I just felt those emotions super strongly. And I feel like I still do, but, like,
in the moment, it was like,
it's so real.
it was so real. Yeah. So I think right now we're just going to read our little letters, and we're going to talk to young Kenzie and young Malia. So, okay. Dear little Kenzie, you are in Los Angeles right now. You came on a work trip with Briogeo, a hair brand. Surprise, you wear your curls now. We are grown up for real. You work with Big Sis, and you love it. You have a great relationship with mom and dad. They love you so much and have always just wanted the best for you. You have a man who loves you with all his heart, and you love him more than you ever thought you could love another human. He supports all of my dreams and goals and is there for me when I fall down. You have 4.1 million besties on TikTok, and you talk with them every day. It is the most supportive group of people, and they were there with you when you had no one. They were your outlet. That's all I have time for, but love, Big Kenzie.
It's getting a little misty in here.
I'm like... It's just, when I first wrote this, it was when we were in LA, and it was right after the shoot, and everything was, like, very fresh and new and real. And 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, a year ago, 6 months ago, I would have never expected to be doing a campaign like that, or to be in the position that we're at right now with such an awesome audience. Like, honestly, you guys, like, I feel like we're best friends. Like, I'll talk to you guys in the DMs. I'll talk to y'all in the comments. And I always feel like it's just the best group of people. And I've said this before, but, like, yes, social media can be a bad place sometimes. But I don't know how we found the perfect little pocket of people who are so supportive, so encouraging. Like, I just couldn't ask for anything more, and like I feel so grateful for that. And the fact that, like, TikTok is our job too is crazy. Like, imagine thinking that like 3 years ago. Like, actually, like, that's crazy.
No, it's insane, because I mean, we literally started in high school, and
just for fun.
Yeah, just for fun. And the fact that we, like, accidentally stumbled upon a dream career is insane. Like, I feel so blessed that we can even call this our job, you know?
I know. Yeah. Oh, dang.
I know
It's just
Kenzie's
crazy.
note when she first read it made me cry. We were both like tearing up. I thought I was gonna start crying during mine, and I did, but like I was already crying before.
I know.
But I feel like that was so good to like Taty have us write little notes or like a letter to ourselves.
I know. That was
I was like,
such a good idea.
It felt healing. It was kind of like you look back on your life and you're like, wow, like I've come so far. But also she was saying too, like not to neglect your younger self and like still kind of
have those conversations.
Writing a letter to yourself, I feel like was the best way to kind of remind yourself and remember what has happened. And
because you can really get caught in the moment sometimes and be down on yourself. Mm-hmm. Even when things are going well, you can be like, oh, well, I could have done this better. I could have done that better. Right. But honestly, like taking the time to reflect and see, oh my gosh, a year ago, I wasn't the same person. Yeah. And I've grown so much every single day. It's like getting better at anything in life, just like becoming a better human, becoming a better woman, a little bit every day makes such a big difference over 6 months, over a week, over 2 months. Right. You know, like it really does add up.
No, and like you were saying too, it's so easy to be like, oh, yeah, like you were saying, being down on yourself. I feel like that's so easy to do. And then when you really actually take the time to think about what has happened, it's like, oh, I can really like cherish those moments and really see how I have grown.
And even like thinking about us in 5 years from now, we're going to look back and be like, let's write letters to our younger self, young 19 and 20-year-old Kenzie and Malia. Like we're going to be in a different place in 5 years than we are now. Yeah. And who knows what that looks like. But it's so cool to like be in the present and just appreciate what we have. Yeah. And look back and be like, oh, little Kenzie would be cheering us on right now.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is too, is Kenzie and I have grown up loving social media and admiring the people that were, you know, YouTubers and stuff like that.
Dolan twins.
I remember Kenzie and I, when we were younger, like in high school, before we even did TikTok, we were obsessed with YouTube. And I was like, man, this would be such a cool job. But I never thought, I was like, oh, that is like a dream, but that would never happen. And the fact that it is crazy to me. So.
Dang. Well, so you want to read your letter to your younger self?
I'm like, I wish I rewrote this because obviously it could have sounded better, and it's like super messy, as you guys can see.
The crossing out.
Yeah, I was like, I should have rewrote this, but this is the raw, authentic first words that I wrote. So, all right, here we go. Dear little Malia, I'm so proud of you, making it through one of the hardest things you have had to go through. Having a thyroid disease is not easy. I know it was so hard for you mentally and physically. Never feeling good, never feeling like yourself. Doctors telling you you're fine when you know you aren't. I'm so glad that you kept persevering and fighting because now you're a lot better. Obviously, this will always be a struggle in your life. But I'm so proud of you. You never stopped trying. You are so strong, important, and brave. You are enough.
Aw. That makes me really emotional because, like, I saw you at your worst. Like, I said I wasn't going to cry. But, oh, my God. When you first, like, found out that you had Hashimoto's, I didn't really know how to help you. And I felt like I wasn't a good sister because, like, sometimes I couldn't tell when you were down. I remember sometimes I just didn't know when you needed somebody. And I wish I could go back in time and be like, hey, do you need somebody today? Do you need me today? Do you want to talk to me today? Like, really be there for you because I know that you needed that, you know? Like,
and I know too, I feel like at that moment in my life, that kind of grew me to where I am now. Because there's a lot of things and ways of thinking that I would never think of now, and like habits that I have now that I wouldn't have done if I didn't go through that. And that's why I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And obviously that was like, I'm not gonna lie, that was probably the worst probably year to 2 years of my life. Yeah. And I think don't be so hard on yourself for thinking that you were a bad sister because you weren't. Because I never communicated that, like, obviously I felt terrible. But at that time too, I always just would push everything under and be like, oh, I'm fine. Like, I don't need to show that I'm struggling. Like,
when in reality, you hadn't slept for 2 weeks.
There were so many things that was going on. And it took me a while to actually come forward to my family and be like, hey, there's a problem here. Like, I'm not feeling well. I'm not well at all, you know.
Mentally, physically, emotionally, yeah.
But I feel like now that we have gone through that, me and you have a better communication and relationship because of that. Like, now you're like, oh, like, are you good? And me communicating like, hey, like, mentally I don't feel that well today. Like, maybe that's why I'm gonna, like, I seem like I'm in a mood, but I'm really just anxious or whatever the case may be.
And I remember when we moved out, Mom was like, hey, she like sat me down and she was like, you need to be aware of Malia because things can go south really fast mentally. Mm-hmm. And you need to be able to see her changing and sit her down and be like, okay, you need to talk to me. Because I know you now, obviously. I feel like it's a little bit of a learning curve. But when you're not doing well mentally, you do shut down and you don't want to talk. Yeah. And I feel like I have learned. And maybe that was Mom pushing me to be like, hey, ask questions. Ask Malia how she's doing. And yes, I would ask you how you're doing, but sometimes it would be on a superficial level. Right. And now it's like, okay, we can sit down and have a conversation. How are you really doing? Mm-hmm. Like,
and I
honestly.
appreciate that so much now. Because even before, like, I think my mom, I'm so grateful for her because she was really, like, I don't really know what I would have done if I didn't have my mom during that time. Like, it would have been really hard. Yeah. Harder than it was, you know?
Truly.
But I guess I should explain what
Hashimoto's is,
because I know a lot of people don't know what that is. I have a thyroid disease, and there's a lot of different aspects to it. So there's like hypo and hyper, which means like your thyroid is not working as much, or it's overworking. So there's different like diseases you can have, but the thyroid basically regulates your hormones. And when your hormones are off, it can affect you physically, and it can affect you mentally. But it's kind of crazy because I basically couldn't get on the medication for Hashimoto's because you have to have a certain like blood work in your body to be able to be like medicated on it. When I went to the doctor, they were like, oh, you're fine. Like, you don't have Hashimoto's. But then when I went to a naturopathic doctor, she actually looked at my antibodies and my blood work, which showed that I was way off in a lot of different ways. But I still couldn't get medicated for the Hashimoto's, if that makes sense.
Can we talk about how that sucks? Especially as a woman, you know when something's wrong with your body.
Yeah, and I did. Like, I knew immediately because when I first started having these symptoms and things were going wrong, like, it was a night and day. Like, I was fine one day, and then after that, it was like, it was hell.
Terrible.
You know?
Yeah.
So, and the crazy part, too, is the way I kind of got into having this problem was actually from my cycle. Like, I had a really bad cycle one time, and this was super random. But basically, I like passed out on the floor, and I got sweats and chills and all of that. And then all of a sudden, after that kind of passed over, I had like the worst cramps of my life. Like, I don't even know how to explain it because it was so bad. But the pain was unbearable to where like I would have to take so many Midals, like. And the hard part was, too, is I couldn't take Midals before I got the sweats and passed out because I would throw it up because of the pain was so bad. Right. So I would have to wait to, like, that nauseousness to pass and then take the Midol, which would suck because I would have to be in pain for a little bit. So I'd have to go through that. But basically, after that point in time, I guess that was so traumatic for my body that it, like, completely had a switch in my hormones. And that's when I started getting all of these like weird symptoms where like my mental health was terrible. Like, I just remember I felt like I was crazy. And I remember we went on a trip to Sedona with our family, and this is like when it first started. And I didn't tell anybody. I was just like sitting in my room like, why do I have these thoughts? Like, why do I like trying to calm myself down because I didn't know what was going on. It was so random. And like, I was just like, why am I thinking of this? Like, these are not normal thoughts. And to put it in perspective, it's kind of like intrusive thoughts. Like, if you get a random, like, what the heck was that? It was like those, but like constant, and they were persistent, and they were
scary.
They were really scary. And I would keep getting them. And I always thought, like, we grew up in a very like religious household. So I always thought that it was like a very, I thought it was like a demonic like presence or something that was like trying to like get at me. And I feel like that could be true, but also later on down the road when I found out it was a hormonal thing, like once that changed, I didn't get those thoughts anymore. And I do now. They're not as bad though. And I know how to handle them.
I remember when you first told me, I think you told me first. And I was like, you got to tell mom and dad, like, they're going to support you. Because you thought, like, they were going to send you to, like, a mental hospital.
I did.
Like, I remember
really
you
did.
telling me that. And I was like, it's going to be okay. Like, yes, there might be something wrong with you, but we're going to figure it out as a family. Like, you're not alone. And I think in those moments, you can feel so alone, but you're not, you know?
Yeah. And also, too, I'm not a very emotional person naturally. But when that hit,
oh my gosh,
that was like, I mean, what I envision is like, if you're pregnant and you're super hormonal, that's how I was. Like, that's how hormonal I was, because I've never experienced anything like that in my life. And I was like, what the heck is this? Like, why do I have all these like random hormones? And why am I crying about this? Like, when I didn't even know what I was crying about. Like, one little thing would tick me off and I'd like start bawling.
Spiraling.
Spiraling and then like getting into like a panic attack. And I've never experienced a panic attack either. So I didn't even know what that was.
I remember like we'd go to sleep at night. And because Malia and I, we had two twin beds in our room and we were sharing room at the time. So we were like 3 feet apart. And I remember we'd go to bed and sometimes I'd hear her like crying. Like I'd hear her like whimpering in her sleep. And I'm like, are you okay?
That's
like,
so sad.
Because when somebody, like, I didn't know if you felt super comfortable talking to me about certain things.
Right.
And obviously we're sisters and we're super close, but there's some things that it's like, it's so personal that at that time it was so real that maybe you didn't want to talk about it.
Right.
Until I was like, I'm going to let her, like, you know, come to me.
It was weird. I feel like our relationship at that time was different because Kenzie had just met John, which is her boyfriend now of like 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And I remember like asking Kenzie like, oh, how'd your first date go and everything? And you're like, oh, it was good. And like, she didn't want to talk about it at all. And I was like, what the heck? Like, why do you, like, usually when I like a guy, I'm like, oh my God, like this happened. Like, I'm telling Kenzie like everything.
Yeah.
And she comes home and I'm like, oh, like.
Why aren't you telling me?
And obviously, like, as a normal person, I would have been like, oh, like, what the heck? But also having like all of my hormones and everything going crazy, I was like, oh, like she hates me, like what the heck? Because I really noticed that like you didn't want to talk about those things, and I just felt like at that time I felt super distant with you, which was not normal because we were always super close.
And I think the reasoning, and we've talked about this before, but the reasoning why is because we shared every aspect of our life. And when I got a boyfriend, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like my one thing that's mine.
Yeah.
Because we shared everything. Because we're practically twins.
No,
like,
and I get that too, because now I'm like, oh, that totally makes sense. But I think it's the communication part that was lacking, because I was like, what? When someone doesn't communicate something like that to you, you're like, you start overthinking and you're like, okay, they hate me. Like, and I have always kind of struggled with that, especially in high school. Like, I remember someone would do something and I'd overthink it. And I'm like, oh, they must hate me. Like, they must not like me. When in reality, it's like, I'm overthinking. But also, I think the communication is so key because, like, I wouldn't have known that.
Right.
Like, if you would have told me that from the beginning, I'd be like, oh, sure. Like, you don't have to, like, tell me everything. And I would have been totally cool with it. But, like, the fact that you, like, didn't communicate that, I was like, oh, what the heck? Like, we're sisters. You're supposed to tell me what's going on.
I think it's funny, too, because I had never been, like, super boy crazy. Like, I think you are very, like, when you get into a relationship, like, beforehand when you were in high school, you'd be like, oh my gosh, I like this guy so much, and you talk to me about him every day, and I'd be like, shut up. Like, okay, I get it.
I don't care.
Not that I didn't care, but, like, it would consume you almost, and I'm very, like, not like that, you know? And obviously now, like, I love my boyfriend, and I talk about him all the time because he's my boo. I love him. But, like, when I first started dating him, I think it was also an emotional thing, like, okay, I don't want to say this is like the best thing ever because what if it ends? Like there was always that thing in my mind, like, okay, well, I can't be so consumed in this relationship. Maybe it's a couple weeks in, 2 months in, and be like, oh, this was the best date ever. Like, I love him. Like, I never wanted to let my brain get there because I was afraid of rejection, and I was afraid of what if this doesn't last? Yeah. Especially around the family. Because that's obviously, true. Like, I met my boyfriend when I was 17, so I lived in my parents' house, and our parents were super strict. So, like, we always had to be around the family. You know, John and I, we would talk in the living room, so we never really got privacy.
And it was so open, too. Like, you would hear, like, a pen drop from our parents'
room.
So
I knew that there was always ears listening, and I just never wanted it to be like, oh, the family loves him, and then all of a sudden we break up. Right. And it's, like, detrimental. And that was always kind of in my brain, like, oh, well, I don't want to let this progressed too much. But then after like 2 months, I was like, okay, yeah, I definitely, he's a keeper. And so after I got over those 2 months, I feel like also I probably explained to you where my head was at during the first date.
That was such an interesting time though, because like even I guess I'll kind of go into more detail on like what I was really going through.
Yeah.
But like after that whole initial episode, that set me into a spiral, like my whole body into a spiral really. But I remember I had really bad insomnia and I wouldn't sleep for like a couple weeks, and it was always like very timely, so it would be like, I don't know, after my cycle. Like not getting sleep is actually crazy. Like going through that, and it also, if you already have hormonal problems, not being able to sleep on top of that makes you feel even more crazy.
Well, then you can literally hallucinate.
Yeah.
If you don't sleep.
And like, I swear that has happened a few times. I'm not gonna lie. But
the intrusive thoughts were just a little too intrusive. Where you're like, wait, am I actually?
I'm like, hold on
this?
a second. What is this?
Yeah.
No, but yeah, it was so hard, and I remember my mom. She was so sweet. Like I love her so much, but she would always be like, I don't care if you like can't sleep. You need to let me know so I can like stay up with you. I'm like, you're not gonna stay up with me. Like I'm telling you, like I'm not gonna be able to sleep, and I'm not gonna put you through that either. I was like, why? Like in my head, I was like, that does not make sense.
Why would you put yourself through that, girl?
Yeah, I was like, I'll just stay downstairs by myself, and I'd go downstairs, watch TV on the couch, and I'd just sit there. Sometimes I'd just sketch because I like to like draw and stuff. So I was like, let me just like keep my mind like sane and watch like a happy show in the back and just like sketch. I don't know. But yeah, I was just like, I don't know. It was a lot. But, and I remember too, like at first I would take melatonin. That would help for a little bit. I think that helped for like maybe a couple days. And then with melatonin, you have to keep upping the dosage because it's like, it's not going to work. And that was the same thing with sleep medication too. And I've heard, especially with sleeping problems, you always have to keep upping it. And eventually you're going to get addicted. And I was like, that's not something that I want to go down. And I was like, if I have to deal with this, I have to deal with it. And hopefully I can like figure out a solution to where I don't have to, you know, lose out on sleep.
Yeah.
But
well, especially
it was hard because there was other medications I would take, same scenario. Like I'd take it for a little bit, it would help. And then I'd have to keep upping it. And then eventually I couldn't take it anymore. So I was just like, there was no luck.
Yeah. Well, I remember like it was always like the first day of your period. Like every month, it was like super consistent that you would have an extreme episode. Like I'm talking, she's on the floor, she's throwing up, she's literally screaming. And also Malia, like she's not an over dramatic person. I'm an over dramatic person.
Like, no, not really.
Well, more than you.
Yeah.
More than you for sure. Like if I'm in pain, you'll know I'm in pain.
Yeah.
Malia, you might not know she's in pain. So when she's like on the floor, like literally sounds like she's giving birth. I'm like, are you okay? You know what I mean? Like it was very scary as someone who knows you're not over dramatic. Because I knew I'd never seen you like this in all of my life. We're literally almost twins. Like I know when something's wrong with you. And I was like, oh my gosh, are you okay?
And I remember mom too. She was like, should we take her to the ER? And after the first episode, like it was so timely. Everything would happen like in order. And then as soon as it passed over, I was fine.
Obviously, it would be like 2 or 3 hours of just extreme pain.
So I don't even know what like they would do at the emergency room or the hospital because they'd probably just prescribe me like, I don't know, painkillers or something.
Right.
But
well, and I remember like I would look at you and your face looked green. Like I'm not kidding.
Oh my gosh.
I'm not. There was a few times where I was like, okay, she's really like not
going through
well.
Yeah. Yeah, that was not
a good time.
Yeah, and I think that's one of my biggest fears now is like going back or being back in that state because I've never felt that bad in my life. And now my aunt actually, she recommended this naturopathic doctor to me and my mom. And it turns out that my mom and my little sister have Hashimoto's too.
I probably have it too, y'all. Just get ready.
Which we all found out at the same time, which was super weird. But both sides of our family, on my mom's side and my dad's side, we have like thyroid problems. So it's definitely a genetic thing. And it's so common now. Like literally I'll talk to people and just like wherever I'm at. And then somehow like something like that comes up and they're like, oh, like I have like thyroid problems too. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I think it's a lot with like the food and the things that we put in our body, the environment, like it's obviously toxic and it's hard to get away from it. Like you can definitely help with your diet, but there's still like lotions, like perfumes.
Well, there's so many hormones. I remember like I would get acne from eating eggs because there's hormones in our eggs.
Right.
And in a lot of the food that we eat, I remember like milk would make me break out and I knew it was hormonal because I had like terrible hormonal acne when I was a kid.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, it's eggs. Eggs have hormones. It's affecting my hormones, which is throwing off my acne in my face.
Yeah.
Like, you can just tell. You know when something's wrong with your body and when something doesn't sit well with you.
And
you
the
know?
annoying thing was, too, is, like, going to the doctor, and they're like, oh, you're fine. Like, you're good. Like, there's nothing you really need to... And they'd act like I would tell them what I went through, and the lady just kind of like, oh, like, yeah.
I've heard that before.
She, like, dead face and everything. I was like, damn, like, y'all don't really care about me, do you? And the first thing that she said was, oh, let's get you on birth control. That was, like, the first thing. And I was, like, I think I was, like, 16. So I was like, oh, like, is there any other, like, thing you can prescribe me or something else, like, another route we can go down? Because I didn't want to go on birth control because I had friends that were on birth control. You know, I've heard very bad things about it. But that was the only option she gave me. So I was like, honestly, I'm desperate. Like, I'll do it.
I can't sleep at night, literally.
Yeah. And it did actually help me for a long time. It helped. I think I was on it for like 6 months. Like, I don't think I was on it for longer than that. But eventually it still was messing with my hormones. I was able to sleep, which was nice. So it bought me time to figure out like what was going on. And at least I was able to go to bed at night.
Right. Yeah.
But after like 6 months, my symptoms started coming back, and it was like the same scenario where I was just like, okay, this is a Band-Aid. Birth control was a Band-Aid for me, and I wanted to actually fix the problem and go to the root of like, okay, what is wrong in my body, and I want to figure it out so I can actually fix it. And I really had to be an own advocate for myself because doctors do not care about you. And
from
that's
our
what
experience.
from my experience, and I'm sure I've heard a lot of people say the same thing. Is like they normally don't care, and it sucks because when you go to the doctor, you're in pain or there's something wrong,
and you want to trust them,
and you know there's something wrong, and you want to trust them, especially when it comes like to your body or like your mental health. Like you want to trust, especially if they're a specialist, you know. So it's like you are putting your trust in them, and then for them to be like, oh, you're fine, you're good, like. That was so frustrating for me because it was time and time again. I'd go to different doctors, like endocrinologists, all those things, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're fine."
Every single woman in our family, our immediate family, has not had good experience with doctors. I've had a lot of problems. I had like these things called hemiplegic migraines that were terrible, and it was a neurological thing. Mm-hmm. And I had to go to the doctor. No one could help me, and time and time again, our mom, our little sister. Everyone has had these problems and no one can seem to help us. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what is going on? Like,
I think the thing is too, is that I've learned is they don't do that diligent of a job, especially in your blood work. Like at an endocrinologist, which is for thyroid problems and diseases, they look at a specific thing in your blood work, but they don't go beyond that. So when I found my naturopathic doctor, she went beyond that and actually looked at the other things in my blood work and was like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong. And I was like, okay, I'm not crazy.
I knew it.
I was like, duh. Like,
I've been trying to tell everybody else this.
And that's why I was so thankful that I found her because, like, I would still be, I'd probably be worse. At this point, I probably would have had to go on Hashimoto medication.
Right.
And
I mean, I remember
not that I was opposed to it.
When you were thinking about literally getting a hysterectomy.
Yeah,
at how old? 18 years old?
Like, you shouldn't have to think about that, but like it was that painful. And I was like, if this goes on, I told myself, I was like, if this goes on for like a good 5 years and there's no like hope for me, I was like, this is not like livable. This is not it. This is obviously like I would go through the pain, it would be once a month. But still, I was like, this is not something that I want to go through for the rest of my life. Like, and obviously that would probably help out with the pain, but everything else would still, you know, all the hormonal problems and everything would have been still an issue. But finding that the naturopathic doctor was like she was an angel. Like when I went on the call, she was so sweet, and she like actually seemed like she cared about me, and she was like, oh my gosh, like this is terrible. Like we want to figure out what's going on. And I was like, that's so sweet. I was like,
I've never heard that before.
I know, like literally the doctors before did not care at all. And I was like, damn, like,
what do
you actually care about me? Or it seems like you care about me. And eventually she went through my blood work and she was like, okay, we need to fix this, this, and this. And there's so many different herbs and supplements you can take to fix certain things in your blood work and deficiencies that I had. And that was the main reason why I was feeling this way and all my hormones were off, is because I had so many deficiencies you know, something was like way off the chart or way under the chart to where my hormones weren't functioning properly. And when she told me that, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'll try anything also. Like I was super desperate. So I was like, I'll take whatever you need me to take. And it is kind of annoying, I will say, that I have to take like, you know, 10 different vitamins.
Morning and night.
Yeah. But they each do something. And it's so cool that there are herbs and things from this earth that can actually help you and heal you. Yeah. And that's what I've experienced. Like I don't even have to take the Hashimoto medication because I kind of made my problems go backwards to where I don't know what the word is, but like I don't have to take the medication for Hashimoto's, which is so cool. Like I can actually heal my body, and all of these supplements that I've been taking have really helped me. Obviously, like my body goes through dips, and I'm trying to be really good at like being consistent with taking my vitamins. I stopped taking my vitamins for a little bit because it gave me really bad acne. And I was like, oh, I don't want to have acne. Like, right. But obviously at this point I was like, okay, I'd rather feel good and have acne than like have my face clear and feel like shit, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I remember I went off for like a couple weeks, and then all of a sudden my cycle comes around, and boom, I was like, just like clockwork. It was not as bad as it was because my vitamins were still kind of in my system. I remember it came back and I had the whole episode again, and it was not it. So I was like, okay, I need to figure out another solution for my acne because I have to take my vitamins.
Yeah.
And
Curology.
Yeah, Curology.
This video, no, I'm just kidding. This video is not sponsored by Curology.
But yeah, it was so cool. And it blows my mind that like those supplements like actually help me. It was so cool. And I am so grateful that I found her because
I'm so happy for you.
I'm better.
Like I'm seeing
or a little bit better.
I'm seeing you thrive now. Obviously, like seeing you then versus now is like night and day.
Well, yeah, you know? Like I can actually sleep now. Like I feel good. I feel energized. I feel
like I
don't have those episodes anymore. Like I feel myself. It's just crazy that I do feel better.
Aww. So yay! I'm so happy that like everything's good now. Just like talking about that, brings me back to the days where everything wasn't okay. You know.
Well, it makes you just like realizing. Well, it makes me realize how grateful I am, and also like during that time we were doing social media. You know, so no one really knew that was going on, and Kenzie was kind of taking over the account because I literally wasn't well enough to really do anything. So Kenzie kind of ran the account, and
it was a good year. It was a while.
It was a while, and some days I'd feel good enough to film. I'm like, okay, let's film, and then some days I'd be like, I can't, like, to that extent.
Right.
But
because if you can't sleep, you're tired. You're groggy. You don't have any energy to be emotionally present.
Right.
And you don't want to do anything. We were very lucky that you were able to, okay, well, I need to try to sleep during this time, and then I can do school, get this done when you have the energy to do so, you know? Because imagine if we were in school and you had to take 6 months off school. You can't just do that.
All that to say, social media is, not that it's fake, but obviously people post their best selves.
It's a highlight reel.
Yeah, literally it's a highlight reel of your life. And no one is perfect, and our life isn't perfect. Yeah. I don't want people thinking that because there's so many things that go on behind the scenes and that no one knows, because we obviously post our best self on social media. That was another thing that was super important to me, was like when I wasn't feeling well, I knew that, and I didn't want to film, and I didn't want to push it because I wanted to be my best self on social media, and I didn't want to fake it, you know?
Right.
And I really want to be authentic, and I took pride in that. So I was like, I don't want to film if I'm not feeling well.
Right.
You know?
And I think now it's almost even different because having the podcast, we have the ability to talk about these things.
Right.
Like on TikTok, it's a 15, 30 second, 1 minute video, and you can't explain your mental health all in that 15, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Like this is the platform for us to talk about, for one, who we really are, but also things we genuinely struggle with, and how we persevered, how you got from where you were when you first found out that you had this thyroid disease, and how mentally and emotionally and physically not well you were versus how you are now. And like being able to tell that story, I know there are women out there that maybe they haven't figured it out yet. Maybe they're like, I know there's something wrong with me, maybe they have a thyroid disease, maybe they have Hashimoto's, or maybe they don't. But this could encourage them to go seek help.
And even just like mental health too. Like
Yes.
if you know there's something wrong in your brain and you can tell something's off, like don't be afraid to reach out and be your own advocate. I know sometimes it can be discouraging going to doctors and then being like, "Oh, you're fine," like blah blah blah. But persevering is like the one thing that really got me to where I am now. And even with my mom too, cuz she really helped me with that.
She'd go to the doctor with you. She'd ask the hard questions.
That was another
She'd do
thing
everything.
too. She would come in with like a notebook and she was like, "Okay, I know when you get there you kind of get flustered and you're just telling them your problems, but there's certain questions and things you forget to ask, and then when you leave you're like, "Oh shoot, like I forgot to ask that," or you know?
Exactly.
So it's nice to have someone else with you to be like, "Oh, like remember to like say this," or even just having notes, like I was saying, listed out so you know what to say to them.
Now we're going to do a little segue. We are going to answer some of your guys' questions about mental health. I really wanted to talk about this and talk to you guys and ask what kind of tips you guys have, what kind of questions you have. I think for me, in my mental health journey, I think I've been pretty good recently in the past few years. I think when we were first taken out of high school and we were alone and it was just you and I was definitely not well. I mean, being literally isolated and by yourself is hard. I wouldn't say I was depressed. I was definitely in a season of sadness, but I don't think I've been depressed because I know what that looks like.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of the women in our family have depression, anxiety, and seeing that makes you see the difference between a season of sadness and an actual mental health problem.
Right.
So,
well, yeah, because I could differentiate the two. I remember I felt kind of depressed in high school. And then when all these other things started happening, I was like, okay, I was just kind of sad. And not that that's like, I should dismiss that at all, because there was kind of a problem there. But the hormonal problem was a lot worse, you know?
right.
And it looked a lot different from the circumstantial sadness.
Exactly.
You know?
Circumstantial sadness versus hormonal or chemical
Imbalance
in your brain.
But that also doesn't mean that you don't need help.
Even if it's just a season of sadness.
If it's a season of sadness and like circumstantial, it is so important to talk about those things, whether it's with a family member, a friend, a therapist. Like, I think everyone can benefit from therapy.
Yes.
Like, talking about those things helps because then you can heal from it, you know, and work your way up to healing it, you know?
That is one thing I love about Gen Z. We're not afraid to talk about our issues. Now we're realizing mental health really is an issue, and it's okay to talk about it.
And it's good to make it important and a priority in your life, because you're going to have to deal with that for the rest of your life. And I think knowing how to deal with those things and having tools to help you will make you so much better.
We're going to go into the first question. Number one is, what if the support you reach out to doesn't help / is too busy?
Ooh. That's tough.
Yeah,
Just
so
because having a support system is so important, whether that's like your mom, your dad,
your
friends. Because I know some people like maybe don't have the best relationship, you know, with their family or their parents. But even like reaching out to a therapist or making that first initial step, because having someone is really important.
Because it is hard to find a good therapist. I feel like it is. Someone commented, they're like, therapy is like speed dating.
That is so
because
true.
if you don't, after the first interaction with a therapist, you're going to know if you like them or not.
Right. Because you may like them, but also this was so important to me when I had my first therapy session. The guy was super nice, super sweet, and he was a little bit older. But not that you need to relate to them, but I didn't feel comfortable opening up to a stranger. I think that's something that I like had to kind of get over. Was like, okay, this guy's gonna think I'm crazy if I tell him this. So there's a lot of things I ended up not talking about, and I was super vague. And I wish if I went back in time, I was very specific. Because if you're not, like, they can't really help you if you're not honest and open with them.
Right.
And that was a hard thing for me, but I definitely can relate to that. Is if you don't like your therapist or there's not like a connection in a way, it's hard to open up to that.
Yeah, and that's what you want. I think if your support system, of course, like as adults, once you get older, people are busy.
Right.
People have their own lives. People have families. They have marriages. They have a lot of things going on where it's like you can't put all of your trust and your support system into one person, especially if they're not your family.
Right.
Like, I feel like, let's just say you didn't have the siblings that you have and you didn't have mom and dad to be there, because our parents are such a good support system and they're always there for us. But if you didn't have that, I would say trying to find a good therapist. That would be my number one recommendation, because it might take a while, but once you have that person there, and even like an online therapy, because you can call up that person and you can say, hey, I'm not in a good space and I really need someone to talk to. They're a professional. They're going to be able to help you and give you tools to, next time when you're going through an episode or you're not feeling well, they're going to be able to really
help you through it.
Right. And give you the tools to be like, hey, I got this.
If you're in school, I know they have counselors trying to get in, because like Kenzie was saying, talking to someone is so important. Because I remember I wouldn't want to talk about it. I kept it in. I kept burying it. And all that does is it keeps building and building and building until you get to a point where you're going to explode. It really does build up in your system. And that is so not good, because it just makes the problem worse. It can start off like by a small thing, a small thought. You're like, oh, push it to the side. But then what happens when you keep pushing it to the side over and over and over again?
It's going to build up and you're going to fall over. Yeah. That's what's probably going to happen.
And that's what happened to me, you know? So when you realize and notice that there's a problem, even if it's small, don't hesitate to reach out to whoever it is.
Whoever your support system is.
Yeah.
Okay, next things next, we got, how do you overcome the feeling of thinking you are a failure?
Oh.
First things first, I want to say that you're not a failure. And I think that in this society, we hold ourselves to expectations and we compare ourselves to other people. I think that is the first thing. And I've felt like this a lot. I felt like, oh, well, I'm not doing what this person's doing. Right. And I'm not doing what this person's doing. I must be doing bad. Right. I must not be good enough. And that's not true. The only person that you should be comparing yourself to is yourself. And even then, give yourself grace. Yeah. Because there's bad days and there's good days. But if you're progressively getting better than who you were yesterday, that 1% of getting better is going to be a big difference over time. So don't compare yourself to other people. That would be my biggest tip, is once you don't compare yourself, you'll be in a way better headspace. And you probably won't think you're a failure anymore, because you're not. You're not.
That's so good. And also, too, like, everyone's path is different. Like, I know I can kind of relate to this, because when we first started social media, we were in high school, but then everyone obviously graduated and went to college. And I'm like, are we making a mistake not going to college? Yeah. When we had an opportunity in front of us and we're like, okay, we're going to pursue this. But college isn't for everybody. And that's not the path, at least for me right now. And I remember, you know, other parents would be like, oh, and I think as a society in general, everyone's like, oh, you're a failure. Not going anywhere in life. You're going to work at McDonald's if you don't go to college.
I remember a lot of parents asking us why we're not going to college. And I remember specifically saying, I can go to college in a year from now. I can go to college in 6 months from now. I can go in 3, 4, 10 years from now. Yeah. And college is always going to be an option. Right now, for me, I want to see where this opportunity is going to take us. I'm glad we did it, because look where we are now. Like, we would have never done that campaign with Briogeo if we weren't full-time, fully committed to the content that we make.
Right.
We would have never done that. And if tomorrow I decide that I want to do school, which I've actually been thinking about, maybe that's in our future. And if it's not, it's going to be okay. But that doesn't make me a failure for not following everyone else from high school and going the same path with everybody else. Right. Our lives are different, and that's okay. I remember, oh my gosh, this makes me so mad. I remember, I think it was a year into graduating from high school. Our friend's mom is introducing us to one of her coworkers. And she's like, oh, do you guys go to this school that her daughter went to? So a university. Do you guys go to the same university as so-and-so? And we're like, oh, no, we actually do social media marketing. We make advertisements for different curly hair companies, beauty companies, and stuff like that. And her mom looks at her coworker and says, they're taking a gap year. They have no idea what they want to do with their life.
I was like, girl, we have a full-on business that we're running right now. Like, we're busy.
We are very, yeah. I was taken back. I was like,
excuse me?
Like, she had no intention of making us feel like the way that I felt after that.
Right.
Like, making me feel embarrassed or sad or like a failure.
Yeah.
There was no intention behind that. I feel like that wasn't what she wanted out of that. Mm-hmm. But that is how I felt.
Yeah.
That's how I felt after that moment. I was like, wow, like.
And I think at that moment too, because we still do to this day get that question, especially because, you know, everyone our age is still in
school,
college and in school. Like, oh, like, what are you doing? And obviously that's a topic that comes up a lot. But now I'm not afraid to be like, oh, yeah, like, we do social media full time. And
we've worked with this company.
Yeah.
We've worked with this
and
company.
If they look down on that, I honestly could care less. I'm like, I know that I'm doing well. So that's all that matters to me. Mm-hmm. Like, the fact that our parents, my dad's an entrepreneur, like, they really encouraged us and was like, this is a cool opportunity. I think you guys should take it too.
And college will always be there.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that they encouraged us, because I feel like it would have been a lot harder and we might have not gone this route.
Having that support system was really nice. And I feel really lucky that we did have that.
Yeah. Like, are we out of time? Yeah. Okay. All right, you guys, that is pretty much it for today's episode. I'm so happy that we got to really talk about mental health. Yeah, and this was
such a good topic, and I definitely see us talking about this more in the future, because this is such, I mean, we can go on for hours.
No, really.
Our time's already up, but thank you guys so much for listening or watching. Make sure to follow us on Big Sis Energy with 2 Ys on Instagram, and
follow our personal TikTok, Mackenzie and Malia, and our Instagrams. I'm Kenzie Grace _,
and I'm Malia Alexis _.
And also DM us if you guys have any questions, topics for the podcast. DM it to Big Sis Energy, and we'll see you guys in next week's episode. Peace.